Ken, did you ever hear the story of the photography professor?
No, I don't think so. No.
Okay. So this professor, it comes from Atomic Habits, was the story, and the professor had two different classes. One of the classes he gave them the assignment of come back with the best photograph. You have one photograph, that is all you need to take this year, but you got to take the best photograph.
Okay. Yep.
The other class that he gave them the challenge of come back with the most photographs. They had to have the highest quantity, and they're graded by how many they took.
Got it. Yep.
So at the end of the year, which class do you think had the better photograph?
Well, you would think the ones that took the time and tried to do the best, right? That's you would think.
That's what you'd think. But in reality, what happened was, if your only goal was to take the perfect photograph, those people ended up sitting around thinking about it, going, maybe this is my theory of doing this photograph, and I'm going to have this idea. And they just took one photograph, and they turned out okay.
Yeah.
But they had all these ideas that weren't used. The people that took 1,000 photographs,
you could go through and find them, right?
Yeah. So they went through and they could see, what worked, what didn't. Let's play with this lighting. Let's play with this exposure time. And so by playing around with it, they got better and better. So it ends up the class that was just taking the most quantity ended up having the best photographs at the end of the year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is kind of our kick into this podcast episode. So welcome to the TapRooT podcast. And we're going to be talking about how often should you perform investigations.
Okay.
So with me, I got Ken Reed with me today, and I know you've had this question before.
Right. It's a pretty common question. It comes up, when you're working to get TapRooT implemented, you're thinking to yourself, what do I need to do? And one of the first things you need to do is, well, what and how many times do I need to investigate things? I mean, it's kind of like the baseline, right, to get started on it.
And I think people come in with different approaches for RCA. There's some people that come in and say, well, I only need to do good investigations when at the high risk level.
Right.
So it's really anything else we'll fill out a form and we'll deal with. But when it comes to a fatality, then we're going to be serious.
We got to be careful about those, right?
Yeah,
we get good answers on those.
Yeah.
Right?
So I think there is a kind of a default approach in some people's cases where they come in with that. I'm only doing, we'll say, good RCA for the important stuff.
Yeah.
Is there a problem with that?
Well, I mean, there's always a spectrum that you got to be on, right? You don't want to do too many investigations. For example, I don't want to do an investigation every time somebody gets a paper cut in the office. I don't want to investigate that. That's a waste of my time, and I'm probably not going to get meaningful results that are going to make changes in our company based on how many times somebody gets a paper cut. So probably not going to do an investigation on that. However, I think you can definitely do too few. I think there is a point where if you only reserve your root cause analysis for the major things, the big stuff, you're not digging deep enough into the larger number of other problems that are out there, and you're only hitting those that are causing that particular problem. But there's all kinds of other problems out there that you're missing that could potentially lead to one of those that you'll just never know unless you do a good root cause analysis.
No, I think companies face this challenge because they know they have a limited number of resources.
Right.
They don't have an infinite number of people to be doing investigations, nor do they have the time to do an infinite number of investigations. That's right. So I think this comes at the start from, hey, we have a finite number of people. They all have jobs to do, and they're the ones that need to do investigations. So I think that starts off with, we have a limitation on what we can do.
Yeah, but I'll put on with that though is I think sometimes that's a false analysis, because yes, we do only have a certain number of resources to apply, but I also think that people think that they must apply enormous amount of resources to do an RCA. And for simpler problems, you don't necessarily need that large number of that large volume of resources to go do that. For simpler stuff, it's easy. You can do them very quickly. So sometimes I think people think RCA, large resource requirement, and that's not necessarily the case. I was talking to someone recently, and I think it was mainly a definition problem. Is, well, we're going to do our root cause analysis only when we need to by our policies. And I said, well, what does that mean? I said, well, we know what a root cause analysis means. It's got this connotation to it. In fact, it's in their procedures what that means, and it must take, and for that particular industry and that company, it took a lot of resources to do that. And when they say RCA, they immediately think about, boom, oh, lots of resources.
Oh, it's going to be hard.
It's going to take forever to do that.
We've got to have report outs in months. And yeah, and we have this addressed kind of in our implementation book. There was some recommendations. And again, you think of that for the risk profile. Different companies say this in different ways. So I've seen somebody, they had different, like 5 different levels.
Right.
And their level 1 was like, we blew up a facility.
Right.
Level 2 is a fatality. Level 3 is a serious injury. It was something like that.
You're down to paper cuts at the end.
Yeah,
right?
and level 4 was like somebody looked at someone cross.
Yeah.
and so it goes down in those layers.
Yep.
And they were like, well, we're going to apply it to the level 1s and 2s. And I was like, well, how frequently do you have 1s and 2s? And they go, very infrequently. So it's like, okay, you're going to put time into learning a skill, and then
only use it infrequently.
Infrequent, once, twice a year. Do you think you're going to get good at that? Do you think you're going to be ready to do those larger investigations? Right. And the answer ends up being no. They're not going to be ready. And so they'll have like 1 or 2 people in the organization that are the experts, and they have to do all the hard work. Mm-hmm. And I think they're missing opportunities by taking that approach.
Right.
Now that's why, originally with TapRooT, we had the 7-step model, and that was what we taught at all points.
Right.
And I think it was 2016, we brought in the low to medium risk incident model to kind of help frame this out of, hey, you should be using these proven techniques for that lower medium risk incidents. You should use it for looking at things that are repeats, looking at things that are taking up resources, and not just wait for the big stuff.
Right. If, like we had mentioned, if you're only waiting for the big stuff, you're limiting yourself to only that particular problem. And if you only have 3 over the course of the year, you've only fixed those 3 problems. But the other 100 problems that are hanging out here, you haven't analyzed. And any one of those 100 could end up being one of those next year, those major ones if you're not careful. I usually recommend when I'm talking to people is don't try to limit yourself to those level 1 and level 2s necessarily, but think of it the other way. Ask yourself, what resources do I have available, and where do I put my trip point to fully utilize those resources? So, for example, if I only do 3 level 1s a year, well, that's not good enough. We have always said in our courses, and when we talk to people, is that each investigator should probably do at least 1 a month. So if you have 10 investigators, right, that's 120 investigations you should be doing every year, right? Well, that sounds great. So how do I where my trip points have to be to get to 120 investigations? That's what you should be doing, figuring what resources I have, how many investigations do I need, and then set your trip point there. And at the end of every year, you go in December or January, you do a review of the last year and say, how did we do? Oh, yeah, we did 300 investigations last year. Oh, well, then your trip point may have been too high or too low, whichever way you want to look at it. We need to bump it up a little bit. That's rarely the case. It's usually the other way. Oh, we only did 6 investigations this year. Well, your trip point's too high. You need to lower it for next year, and now see how that goes. Work that through the year, and then do another review at the end of the year, and see if you're getting closer to that 1 per month per investigator. That's what I recommend to do. Is
now, we've talked to people that are on different ranges. There's people that we do 10,000 investigations a year, and then we've had we do 3. Mm-hmm. And if you're not having, and I don't want anyone to be having 3 fatalities, 20 fatalities a year, 100 fatalities, I definitely don't want that.
That's not your goal.
That is not our goal. Have 100 lost times or that. If I'm in one of those industries where we don't have these major ones happening all the time, what are some of the things I can apply these techniques to? What are some ideas that typically you deal with?
Sure. So there's a couple different directions here. So probably, and this is what about 60% of our customers use TapRooT mainly for EHS problems. Well, one thing you can do is, well, do we have quality problems here at this company? I'll bet you we do. I bet in our manufacturing line down here where they're not using TapRooT, maybe we need to go and give those guys a hand. And if I'm only doing 6 investigations a year per person, I'll bet they have some down there that we could use. So get outside of your box, get outside of your purview, and go look for other problems. If you think only problems are in your EHS department stuff, you're not looking hard enough.
You're probably missing the biggest dollar value of doing good root cause analysis is by looking at operations and quality.
Right.
Another way to think, so we have like the incident risk. We've talked about you could lower that incident risk to give you more investigations.
Right.
You can broaden your scope. One of the other things that you had mentioned was precursors, near misses and precursors. So for those that don't know, a precursor incident would be anytime you had a near miss where one safeguard would have resulted. If one safeguard had failed, one more in the chain of events had failed, you would have had a severe injury, a fatality. So we look for those opportunities where we had something occur but a safeguard worked. We still can analyze those precursors to say, hey, we dropped this load. Yes, it fell in our isolation zone. That's good news.
That safeguard worked, right?
Nobody got hit, and the safeguard worked. But there's an opportunity here for us to learn something that would maybe prevent the next load from falling.
In the first place, that's right.
And so those opportunities are, that's really the biggest opportunity for preventing those fatalities in the future, is really looking for those opportunities in precursor incidents.
So precursors is a great idea. Yeah, those are oftentimes simpler investigations to do. They're oftentimes not as complicated.
Because you really only have maybe one mistake to analyze, as opposed to in a big incident you might have
4 or 5 or
4,
6,
5, 6, 7.
Right.
I've seen 20. I don't want those investigations. A lot had to go wrong there.
Yeah.
So having that be a way to get some practice but not overwhelm your resource and time.
That's right.
Precursors are a good way to do that. Another one that I commonly recommend when we try to get to this one a month, I always ask people, I say, raise your hand if you do an audit. And almost everybody in safety or quality is doing an audit.
Right.
At least once a month, maybe 20 times in a month.
Yeah.
And so when you find something in an audit, how do you approach that? A lot of times people are trained to, I find something, we fix it, and we tell the person, follow this rule next time.
Right. And you're done.
Done.
Check
that.
Check that one
Solved
off.
that problem. I'll never see that again. Right. So you get those audit findings, and instead of just going, tell them to follow the rule next time, you stop, and in TapRooT, you go through the root cause tree. You may, if you're just in the practice, you may not do the full, I got to read every question, I'm going to circle things. And oftentimes what I tell people is stay familiar with the process. Go through the 15 questions. Really just ask some human performance questions to help you better understand why this mistake occurred.
And you may find that it was after doing a quick check like that, that's actually a little more serious than you thought. And you may end up going back and saying, let me build a snap chart on what was going on here. I don't think I fully understand what was happening. Yeah. Now you can go in and practice your snap charting, get your causal fact, and then make this a little bit more in depth if you need to. But you're right, for most audit type things, they're relatively simple. And it's a quick run through to get yourself back up to speed, get yourself familiar with it, and come up with better answers at the same time.
And it gives you those opportunities to look for opportunities for improvement. Yeah. And like you said, if you see something, you go, "Ooh, this wasn't replaced," and you go back and you're at a material site and you're like, "Hey, not only is this one bad that I found, but look, there's 10 more. I have a generic issue. I really do need to do something larger with this."
Right. Yeah.
And so those are the kind of things that I think looking for opportunities to practice will make you better, so that when a big investigation does come up, you know the questions you're going to have to answer, and therefore you can collect the right evidence. You're going to be more familiar with it.
A little bit further in that also is when I hear the word audit or observation, I oftentimes people oftentimes associate that with larger problems. So we're going to do this big lift over here. Today we have this lift. We don't do it very often. So we're going to go observe this and watch it and make sure it goes well. And we're going to do an audit on that. Hey, that's great. That's in line with what we're talking about. But you could probably just ask yourself, what are my people doing every day? What are they doing today that they do every day that I haven't watched them do in a long time? A guy that's going to go put some scaffolding up. He's going to raise some scaffolding over there. Do we ever go out there and audit these guys raising scaffolding? Not operating up there and doing the work, but actually building the scaffolding. Or a guy's going to enter an enclosed an enclosed tank. Have we ever watched these guys do this, or do we just wait till somebody screws something up and then go and look at it?
Yeah.
So observations don't have to be big stuff. They can be little tiny everyday jobs that your people do.
Yeah, and I put this in as like you're really looking at normal work, and especially the high risk activities around normal work.
Sure.
So again, if we're doing regular lifts on our construction site, well, let's go and map out that process, and you can build a rough snap chart.
Sure.
We teach people not to build. This is not every single motion they have to do. They lifted their hand, they pushed the button and turned their head. It's not that granular. It's like, okay, what were the 5 roles that they needed to do? What was the success? And then I can have a rough map of what I'm looking at, and then see where things were different.
Right.
Where did they stand out slightly different? Where was the process slightly different than what my expectation was? Right. I know in HOP, they have a big thing for looking at work as I imagined it versus work as done. For us, we think of more on like the CHAP side of this, which is the prescribed way versus the reality. Right. We prescribe it here versus how it actually gets done.
Yeah.
Because you'll find when you do this, you go, oh, they did that differently. And I go ask some questions, the who, what, when, under what conditions, and suddenly I find out, oh no, they didn't have the resources they needed to do this job.
They didn't have the right tools or whatever it was. We thought they did, but
they came on site and they're like, oh, you're supposed to do it this way, and you're like, yeah, but the ground is frozen. You can't just do that this way.
You can't do it that way. Yeah.
There's conditions that are different than we expect, and so there's a big push on adaptability. And sometimes they say you want to quantify that adaptability and say, congratulate people for being adaptable. But at the same time, you need to understand
why they had to adapt in the first place.
Yes, because a lot of times it's your processes were bad and you trust that they'll get away with it because they'll figure it out. But in reality, you're setting them up for failure. You're setting them up. And so taking those opportunities to apply this technique proactively, looking at those repeat high-risk activities, that's where you get value.
I'm a huge advocate of proactive use of the system. Most companies don't do that enough, from my perspective. They use root cause analysis because they have to start with, and that's because something bad has happened. And then they get good at, hey, I want to use it now. Let me go use it for smaller stuff. But even then, they don't use it enough in a proactive method. Let me go out and look for problems, because if you don't think you have problems at your company, you're not looking hard enough. Everybody has problems at their company. Everybody. So you got to go find them. Don't wait till the problems find you.
And the other thing is, by actually applying the TapRooT techniques of snap charts, and for proactive, we call them typically significant issues, and the root cause tree, you have a list of best practices. You have a way of mapping out your process to really see the way it's done and what's different in context. So by having all of that visual, you really do get a better picture of what's happening.
Yeah.
And so it's very underutilized in the proactive space. And again, I think that is because people are, well, I've got to do all these big investigations and I'm focusing on that. And it's, again, like you said, we have to apply our limit. What do we want to be focusing on? So in our low risk model, we have a stop sign for that.
Yep, we do.
And it's there because we want to collect information and say what we want to learn more, but it also is to remind companies that you have an option, you have the ability to stop investigations. And you can make those decisions based on risk, based on frequency, based on probability.
Yep.
Those are all decisions companies have to make.
Right. It's you want your company's policies to be strict enough and detailed enough to tell you when you're supposed to do it, but do investigations and the types of investigations to do. But by the same token, there's got to be a little flexibility there to when somebody says, well, my policy doesn't require I do one here, but it really makes sense to do one, or it requires it here, but doesn't really make sense to do one here. So you can hit that stop sign and just stop at that point. Yeah.
Now there's 3 maybe different ways you could learn about how to apply this. Probably the most all-encompassing thing someone could do is go to one of our 5-day courses. That's where you're going to get both the low to medium risk model, the major 7-step model, and proactive. We cover all 3 of that in our 5-day advanced training for team leaders. So if you want to learn all of it, that's probably the best choice. There's also a couple different things we've done for people. We have a proactive and auditing course that kind of focuses more on taking TapRooT and applying it in that auditing framework. And I know from our human error course that I do with Mark, that one is all about the proactive from the actual tools and techniques side, which is how do I take these best practices in TapRooT and apply it in the proactive improvement program side. So there's a lot of different things that we've offered people to get them to understand these different ways of applying TapRooT.
Sure.
So it's just get it to your site. Get it to your site.
I think you'll find that if you try to hit that one a month per investigator, I think that'll almost force you in the right direction. If you make that part of your company's goals for the next year, I want every investigator to do at least one a month, and maybe you double them up. Maybe you double people up. 2 people will do all investigations. That way they both get practice. But you probably will find your trip points are so high that you don't have enough to do that, and it will kind of force you to look at those lower level ones to get your numbers down.
And if you're doing good root cause analysis, your trip points will naturally lower over time because you're going to stop having those major investigations. You're going to have to move down to lower, medium risk, spread it over to quality to get that one a month.
And that's why I think that annual review at the end of each year is a crucial part of that. So it's easy to say, here's my trip point, and 5 years later realize, well, that trip point, I'm not having any of this big stuff anymore, and I'm not doing any of these. So you need to adjust that. It needs to be a fluid trip point that you can make an adjustment on every year.
I think if people focus that way, 1 investigation per month per investigator, whether that is proactive, reactive, major, minor, focusing on spreading it from safety, quality, operations. If you're doing that in any of those areas, 1 a month, you're going to get much better results.
Right.
So if you want to find out more, check out the links below for looking for upcoming TapRooT courses. You can figure out this if you want to schedule an executive briefing. Again, you can check out on our webpage. There's a little button that says schedule an executive briefing. Ken, myself, one of the other instructors here will talk with you and help you plan out an idea for how you can do it more than 1 investigation a month. All right. Thank you. And we'll see you at the next TapRooT podcast.
Bye-bye.